Good day, everyone. This is another episode of the Muni Poly Matters podcast. I am Alan, once again, here with you chatting with another candidate running in the Ontario municipal election on October 24th. Chatting this time with another candidate from the city of Toronto, just to just sort of bring you up to speed here a little bit. The last time I spoke with Kevin Rupasinghe from Scarborough Southwest. I asked him, who should I talk to that seems like a progressive young person looking to become a new face on city council, which is sort of the theme I'm going with here. And then he suggested someone named Amber Morley from Ward 3 in Etobicoke Lakeshore. So we're going to the west end of the city now. And yes, I'd like to introduce the aforementioned Amber Morley to this podcast. Amber, how are you doing tonight?
I'm really good, Alan. So glad to be here with you. Thank you for including me and providing this opportunity. I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, okay, that's great. So how is your campaign going so far?
It's going really well. This is not my first rodeo. I did run previously in 2018 for the same seat to represent residents here in Etobicoke Lakeshore. So that was my first run at office, but had certainly been involved with politics and campaigns since I was a teenager in my neighborhood. Yeah, it's kind of interesting being a second-time candidate. Obviously, having that experience under my belt and having a sense of what to expect before, throwing my hat into the race has been really helpful for me to strategize around my campaign, as well as sort of lean into an existing group of supporters and community champions who were on my team and on my side in 2018.
Okay, good. So just a brief background, and I will include this information later in my post. Etobicoke Lakeshore is a ward in South Etobicoke. It used to be 2 wards. It is now 1 ward, but we'll get into that a bit later. Yeah. So the roughly population is about 110,000 probably. It includes 160. Oh, thousand. Okay, so that might be, yeah, we'll bring that up later. Communities in the ward include areas such as Mimico, Long Branch, and New Toronto, as well as the part of Etobicoke that I guess stretches along the Queensway. So if you're ever in that area, that is where Amber is running. So Amber, I guess my first, I guess the initial question would be maybe just tell me a bit about yourself. Like I guess you're born and raised in your ward.
I am, yeah, born and raised in South Etobicoke Lakeshore. I'm 33 years old, so I guess fairly young, considering the average age of politicians in Canada. Also identify as someone who is a member of multiple equity deserving groups. Obviously, I'm a woman. I'm a racialized woman. My father is a free diving fisherman in the Bahamas. So that is a little bit about my background. And my mom is an artist and a social worker. She's retired now, but raised my brother and I pretty much on her own here, and did a great job at it. But certainly, we existed in an incredibly supportive community, but with little resources, right? Very low income, and we're able to tap into things like our local daycare centers, our local parks and recreation programs, community centers, and things of that nature, which we were incredibly well served by. And I'm proud to say my brother and I, grew up to be very civically minded and community engaged folks. My brother is an educator. He works with children in the TDSB. And I've kind of pursued a path in community building, community organizing, and I work currently as a health promoter at Lamp Community Health Center, which is, again, a local CHC in my area that I actually have been going to and being involved with in different capacities since I was about 11, 12 years old. Some of my time there for about a decade, I ran an organization called the South Etobicoke Youth Assembly, and we were all about sort of advocacy, but as well creating opportunities for young people in our community to, again, be civically minded, to find their passions and their gifts and sort of their paths in life and sort of support them in that. So those are some of the aspects of my background, and I think certainly of my experiences that have brought me to this journey of running for office.
Okay, thanks for that answer. So your background is very community minded, I guess.
Very
And
much so.
right. So so even early on, you thought about like doing something related to the city,
Mhm.
whether it's outside of City Hall or eventually at City Hall. So like, was there a point in your life in that time where you think, oh, maybe I should like try to pursue something inside Toronto City Hall in order to advance the issues that you cared about?
Yeah, you know what? I worked really hard as an advocate for many, many years. The organization that I ran, the South Etobicoke Youth Assembly, we used to host all candidates debates. We used to do mobilizing around the election, and we were never specifically aligned with a party or necessarily, encouraging folks which way to vote. For us, it was just an opportunity to inform folks about how does democracy work, what does it look like, and how do we ensure that we're counted and our voices matter. So it was really a lot of just wanting to be part of a system that worked and that felt inclusive. And so as I navigated that journey, I came to realize that that wasn't necessarily the case. You can advocate till you're blue in the face, but if you don't have politicians who have any kind of political will, lived experience, or desire to make a difference in some of the issues that were of concern to us, we really didn't see any progress on them, and that was incredibly frustrating. So I actually continued to pursue my own path. I studied public relations here in Humber College. It's one of our main community stakeholders here in South Etobicoke. They own tons of property and are continuing to develop and create a lot of great spaces for students and residents here in South Etobicoke. But I did study public relations there. I've always been a great communicator. I love people. I love problem solving. There's a number of those skills that I have. And then I actually landed a job totally by fluke. I didn't necessarily seek it out. It sort of found me. But I ended up as an administrative assistant at Toronto City Council shortly after graduating from my PR program at Humber, and was working at the time in the northern part of my ward, which was Old Ward 5. And now it's part of the ward that I'm running to represent. So that was a little bit of my background and kind of what brought me into politics. I was working as an admin assistant, really and it was an incredible opportunity. I never really pictured myself working in that space, in that capacity. And I was totally a sponge. It was a really interesting time. It was under the Rob Ford administration at the time. And there was quite a lot of media attention and other things going on around that office. So it was a really interesting time to get a job at City Hall and to find my feet there. But I did stick around at City Hall for about 5 years, and I worked in various capacities, including most recently, I was a constituency assistant to the Etobicoke Lakeshore, the Etobicoke Center councillor at the time. And that was incredible. And I was really good at my job. I really enjoyed it. But I was continually frustrated by the lack of representation, frankly, and also the lack of progress that we were making as a city in general. So as a citizen, that was really frustrating to me. And I felt my energy and my time could be well used in this capacity to serve residents in this way. So this is the path.
I looked at your website, which is ambermorley.com, and looking at your bio, you worked for Councillor Peter Milchin, which was then Ward 5. You said the northern part of the ward, and then you got a job, and then you started working as a constituency assistant for Etobicoke Center in Ward 4 for the councillor. I believe it was either John Campbell or Stephen Holiday. I can't remember
It
which
was
one.
John Campbell.
John Campbell, I think John Campbell would have been more aligned with your political leanings than the other one.
A little closer to the left.
I'm curious myself because I do expect that people who are in public life who are elected, like city councilors, for example, that they don't have a normal 9 to 5 schedule. They will have to like respond on things on a weekend and that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Like as when you were an administrative assistant or constituency assistant, was that the same as well? Like it wasn't just a typical 9 to 5. You also had to like respond on like unexpected periods on like constituents' concerns or an issue that they had. Like how was life for you in that role? Like
It was exciting, very dynamic. I really honestly love working in the role of serving citizens, especially in the city, because you actually have access to power. You can call the person in the various divisions that you need and they're responsive to you because you're calling from the councillor's office. You don't have to wait in the queue or kind of, all of these kinds of other things that can make it really frustrating to deal municipally and with various departments. But it was exciting. My role as a constituency assistant certainly included going out regularly to visit residents at their homes, to look at issues, whether it's a new development and the neighbors looking in on their yard, or, a shadow impact or a chipped curb, or all manner of issues. And that was one of my favorite parts of the job, was actually meeting with people, explaining to them the rules and regulations, coming up with a game plan to address their issues, and then staying on top of folks to make sure that things were getting done. That's something that I really, really enjoyed doing, and it was a lot of fun. But what I would say in terms of your question around sort of the urgency, what we would always say is, like, our office is certainly an office of escalation. So usually people will call 311, initiate their issues. And if they're not getting results, they'll often call the councillor at that point. So certainly that is a reality, but we're not the office of emergency, right? So if it's an emergency, somebody's going to, potentially call 911 or whatever emergency services. So the evening and weekend commitments typically were more like community meetings, special events. If council meetings sometimes run into like midnight, there's those kinds of things, very jam-packed agendas that require a lot of time from folks. And levies and different community events like that often take place, or residents associations, those kinds of things, they often meet after typical business hours. And councillors should, in my opinion, be present and participatory as much as possible in whatever, happenings in the community. So it is very busy and demanding in that sense. But I would say it's not as much. And of course, in a crisis situation, if there is, an accident, violence, or something of that nature, certainly I think it's important for the councillors to be looped in and be present and showing up and commenting on those things, and facilitating a response where appropriate. But yeah, that's kind of the cadence or sort of the flow, I would say, of the demands of the job, is from my experience and from what I saw during my time at City Hall. But that being said, that was in a 44 ward scenario.
Yeah,
right?
let's move on. Yeah, let's move on to that a little bit.
It's a totally different game now,
Yeah.
and I'm very aware of that.
Right. Okay. So in 2018, you said it was your first time running for office, and let me just put into a bit of a background as for people who are listening who may not remember what happened in the city of Toronto in 2018. So just about, I think it was literally on the day of the last day to register as a candidate in 2018, the Ford government announced that Toronto City Council will be reduced from 47 to 25 wards. So were you running in the ward south of the Queensway?
That's right.
Okay.
At the time, it was Ward 6.
Ward 6, and I believe you were challenging incumbent Councillor Mark Grimes, as
That's correct.
And then so after that reduction happened, the ward became Etobicoke Lakeshore, which mirrors these boundaries of the current federal and provincial ridings. So I just want to ask you, like, how was that transition for you? I don't even know if transition would be the best word. It sounds like the most diplomatic word to describe what happened.
Very diplomatic.
But it seemed like, I don't know, I can't remember how many candidates were running in those two Etobicoke Lakeshore wards, because once you combine the two, either some would just drop out of like frustration for like what the heck, or like you pressed on, you decided to continue your campaign. So like, what was that like? Like, what were the challenges? What were the more positive aspects that came out of that change?
I'll have to get back to you on the positive aspects, because I'm still, other than obviously meeting all of the wonderful residents and engaging with them and learning more about, these various aspects of our community, our new community, right, larger community. Certainly that is a process. And my first job in politics was actually serving that community with Peter. So I have a lot of familiarity with them, their issues and some of the touch points there. But with respect to what that was like, it was very jarring, very dejecting, and frankly, a little bit traumatic. Running for office, I'm sure you appreciate, is no small undertaking, especially if you're running to be a serious candidate or a winning candidate. I had actually left my job very prematurely in 2018 because I was so serious about, dedicating as much time and energy to this. I left my job in January. I registered in May. And I was running full-fledged, raising money, printing literature, signage, design, all of these things, right up until, right up until July, when we got this announcement from the newly elected Ford government, elected on no platform, never having mentioned this as a potential move or even, a thought. And so being blindsided, completely blindsided by that change was, again, discouraging and dejecting. I had a plan. I had confidence in my ability to win. I know my neighbors. I know my community. I had built a team. Like, I had done the work, and I knew the councillor was vulnerable and that I could take him out, frankly, or I could get his seat, right? In that sense. And so, yeah, it changed the game entirely. And so that was difficult, but luckily I have an incredible team who were just as passionate about the change that we're working towards as I am, and who did not let me get down, for more than a day. They said, all right, Amber, go cry for the weekend, and then we're getting back to work, because, nothing changes if nothing changes. And we still need to have great candidates who we can believe in and vote for. And so we put our heads down and we continue to work through. And we actually were polling ahead, according to the mayor's polling, 10 days out from the election. As mentioned by one of his own strategists, we were polling well ahead of the councillor and the rest of the competition 10 days out from the election after that massive change, because we were able to shift and adapt and carry our great energy and message forward. And then so the mayor did a robocall in our ward as well to support the incumbent councillor, and advise folks that he was in a close race with the person in third, which wasn't quite factual, but certainly I'm sure had the impact, the intended impact. And so the incumbent councillor was reelected with about, I think, 40% of the vote to the 27% that I was able to gain, and was really proud of that showing.
Well, just to put some stats in into this episode here. Mark, yes, you mentioned in 2018, Councillor Grimes won with 40% of the vote. You garnered an impressive close to 11,000 votes, which was about 27%. But the incumbents never really cracked over 40 or even 45, except for one election in like 2010. And this guy's been in office since 2003. Just curious, like, what is different from 2018 to your campaign now? I mean, I think I noticed, like, when I reached out to you, you had your media, you have a media spokesperson. It seems you have a good solid team around you this time. Like, what's different about 2022 and in 2018? Like, I don't know, maybe even just, maybe there's less candidates, because it seems that there's not a lot of people interested in running the Toronto City Council.
No, but not even the current councillors. They don't want the job anymore.
Yeah, you would hope, right? That'll make it easier for you.
It's crazy. It's like crazy times. But yeah, so sorry, repeat your question for me one more time.
What's different now in the campaign than it was in 2018?
Yeah. So I'm a big believer in teamwork makes the dream work. I'm a big believer in collaboration, in empowerment and engagement of folks, and everyone contributing where they can. So both in 2018 and this time around, I very much was intentional about building a strong team around me. And so I had both of those. I had that intention, and I have been really successful and grateful for the incredible people who've come, to the table in both instances. I would say this time around, and so in 2018, there was like minimum a dozen candidates. I think there was at least 9 registered candidates by this point. And so right now, there's only 2 folks registered in our ward, myself and one other. The incumbent councillor has not registered again and hasn't made public his intention whether or not he will be running again. As I'm sure you know, the deadline is quickly approaching, so we are, awaiting to see what happens with regards to that. But we're continuing to work our plan. Like, in elections, the person who gets to the most doors and has the most conversations has the strongest chance of winning. And I've always been a worker bee. I've always been a hard worker. I pride myself on that. And I'm willing to do the work, and my team and I have been out getting it done. So we're raising money. Our goal is to raise about $90,000. We are quite a ways away, and we encourage folks to check out the website, as you mentioned, ambermorley.com/donate, if they want to support our effort, and see me elected to city council this time around. And so that work continues, but we have 50,000 pieces of introductory lit that we've printed, and over 35,000 have already been delivered. So our team is incredibly committed and passionate through the heat waves, through the pandemic. They're continuing to pound the pavement and make sure that everyone in Etobicoke Lakeshore knows about me as a candidate and knows about the upcoming election. And we'll of course be shifting to proper door knocking and canvassing and engaging more deeply with folks once our first piece of lit is completely distributed throughout the ward. So yeah, it is quite an undertaking, a very large community to cover. But together with my team, we're getting it done.
Cool. Let's get into some issues that are important in Etobicoke Lakeshore. I'm just taking a look at this report that came out from this organization called the Action on Poverty, Alliance for Poverty-Free Toronto. And they're looking at stats for Etobicoke Lakeshore, and it says population living in poverty is about 18%. Tenant households 39.9, so close to 40% of your residents are tenants. And children living under 18 living in poverty, 21%. So, looking at those stats, it's like you look at a place like Etobicoke and you can see that there are like a lot of new high rises and new developments, but there's also like what I see as a trend in like suburban communities is that there's sort of like hidden poverty that's not as well seen. It's more visible in downtown Toronto, but like are issues of like poverty and like homelessness, how big are those issues in your ward, and how are you going to address them if you become the councillor?
Yeah, thank you for the question. They're definitely huge. The Toronto Poverty Reduction Strategy came out, I don't want to think about how long ago, but quite some time ago, and there was some very specific recommendations included with that. And of course, as seems to be a trend with our city, is we like to adopt reports in principle and say that we agree with this thing called poverty reduction, or we agree with cycling or transit or whatever. But when it comes to budget time, when it comes to making the investments and providing the leadership to make the connections to actually move these recommendations forward, we're falling flat. And that's unacceptable. Children growing up in poverty in the city of Toronto, in my opinion, is unacceptable. And we can and should and need to do better as a city. There are, as I said, many recommendations that folks who are much smarter and much more, informed on these issues than I am have put forward and need to be supported. So a big part of my messaging this time around is it's not about going to reinvent the wheel. It's about providing the leadership and political will to move forward on these visionary statements that we have, but that we haven't been working on. So housing, TO, we have a 10-year action plan, right? Transit, we have many action plans and master plans. And again, we continue to see decision-making on council that's not in alignment with the things that we're adopting in principle and is not representing the values or interests of Torontonians, and continuing to leave a lot of folks behind. So I mentioned to you earlier, I grew up in South Etobicoke, born and raised. I live in a cooperative housing community, and there is about half a dozen buildings built in my area. And growing up, doing a lot of the advocacy that we were doing at the time with SEA, as I mentioned, 40% of the families here were living in poverty, just in our own little block alone in New Toronto. But across the street, there's multi-million-dollar houses along the lakeshore, right? And folks who are living in a completely different socioeconomic category. And so how do we build a city where we are addressing that divide as opposed to exacerbating it? That's my interest, and that's my hope in terms of getting in as a councillor and providing leadership on some of these important files like poverty reduction.
Yeah, you mentioned that the city needs to somehow move beyond just issuing visionary statements and then actually implementing them. But lately it seems that even just the nuts and bolts are a bit of a challenge in the city of Toronto. I'm seeing pictures all over social media every day of like overflowing garbage cans, public restrooms locked, so swimming pools that are being told are closed. Like, what is that a failure of? Like, I don't even know which category to put that in as an issue. Like, I don't know if it's infrastructure or just government services or just
leadership. In my mind, leadership, because I will be the kind of counselor who either shows up myself, but again, knowing this 25 ward scenario, there's huge demand on counselors' times in with respect to participating within obviously council meetings, community council meetings, standing committees, and various other responsibilities that each counselor are assigned. But showing up and supporting residents with their various issues and concerns and ensuring a high quality of life and a high quality of service is absolutely critical to me. Having good relationships with our public service and with leaders within the public service so that our office can ensure that action is taken in a, you know what I mean, on a timely basis on some of these matters would be a key priority of mine. And like doing regular weekly visits to the constituency, right? I live here, I live in the ward, I walk the ward, I'm down on the lake all the time, I ride my bike in the ward. So it's something that I'm very familiar with. I call 311, when there's garbage overflowing and these kinds of things. But as a counselor, you have even more power and capacity to get immediate and or short-term action on important issues like that. And then you mentioned the washroom lockout piece. That's actually more of a policy issue in some cases, right, with council, and it's a decision of the larger council, but putting motions forward to ensure access for folks who are enjoying our beautiful public parks, that should be a minimum, in my opinion. We have an incredible, capable public service who can maintain these facilities, and we need to support them to do that and support Torontonians to access these facilities that they've paid for and deserve.
So I believe when you mentioned when you talked about your time as a constituency assistant, you mentioned how sometimes you have to respond to residents who had concerns about issues like the shadow over their property from the building next door. And when I hear that, it's like one of those common reasons why local residents seems to be opposed to new developments that come in, no matter whether that development application has met all the criteria that it has to. And I think development is, no matter if it's your ward or it is another ward in Toronto or anywhere else in Ontario, frankly, it seems to be like affordable housing is a major issue, but development is also like it kind of buttresses against local concerns, and that's always a challenge. My understanding is the current councillor has some interesting ties to the development industry that we don't want to get. I don't want to get into that right now, but this is about you. But it's not like what I'm trying to say is that the developers are evil or anything like that. It's like they're a necessity. But like, how do you like manage the need to build more housing versus like trying to address people's local concerns? How do you balance that?
Again, I know it sounds really like basic and simple, but I genuinely believe it comes down to leadership. I agree with you. I don't think that developers are like some evil thing that we need to villainize or work against per se. I think, frankly, developers are key stakeholders we need to get busy on building things like affordable housing in our city. And so working collaboratively with folks who have the capacity to build the infrastructure that we need, incentivizing them to do so, and working both with them and city planning and local communities, centering community voice to ensure that whatever is coming into neighborhoods represents complete communities and is a benefit not only to the folks who are going to join our community as new residents in these developments, but also a benefit to the residents who are already existing and living and enjoying our community. And so taking their needs and concerns into consideration is critical, but then advocating those and working collaboratively to ensure that we're not having a situation where we're building a wall of condos and we don't have the infrastructure to support the residents there. And then the little bit of infrastructure that does exist is being compromised for existing residents. So an example of that in our community is the Park Lawn and Lakeshore, Humber Bay Shores community. It's an incredible community. It's beautiful. There's views of the city of Toronto, views of the Lake Ontario. You can even see on a clear day down straight through to the United States. And there's gorgeous parks in that area. However, there's been such an influx of people And we haven't kept up with our transit. We haven't kept up with social services. And frankly, kids are having to bus into schools because there's not enough spaces within our local schools. So, I'm not anti-development. I think development is critical, especially we have 100,000 people plus on a wait list. That's over 10 years to get into affordable housing. We absolutely need to get busy on affordable housing, and we need to be building that. Not only building it, but also better regulating the existing supply, frankly. But yeah, I think there is work to be done, and showing up, hosting those consultations, carrying those messages forward, and really just being mindful of, the community characteristic and the community experience that we want to maintain while we're building and we're seeing our community grow is really, really important to me.
Okay, so I have a few more questions left. Gotta get in a couple of more wonky questions. So Premier Ford recently announced that he would like to launch a pilot project to enact strong mayor powers, quote unquote, for Toronto and Ottawa. So just wondering, how do you feel about this? I mean, I have my own personal feelings towards it, but I'd like to hear from you first, and then maybe we could dive deeper into that.
Yeah. I have a lot of feelings, Alan. Yeah, I think, it's interesting. There's been a lot of attempts to make city council more effective, I think, by this premier and by this government. I don't know that they have paid off. I know initially with the announcement and the move to cut the wards to 25, it was to save $25 million and, all of these kinds of things. I don't know that anyone has actually done an audit on how it's all shaken out, but I can almost guarantee you it has not resulted in any savings. And I'm sure it's actually cost significantly more to taxpayers in the province. And so, for me, it's a little bit of an exercise in frustration when we are governing from a place of not a practical place. I really believe in pragmatic approaches to efficient government, but I don't think that some of the approaches that we've seen come down from this government have resulted in that. As it relates to the strong mayor powers, you may have seen, I'm not sure if you're a follower of City Hall Watcher, Matt Elliott does a really great piece, and he did an analysis of this actually recently and said, well, 97.7% of the time, the mayor actually, his items on council, or his pieces are typically supported by council, right? That's part of the work, is collaborating with your colleagues and getting folks on site in advance of votes and, understanding all of those pieces. So the mayor has historically had a lot of support on council. As you know, we've had a very right-leaning council for the last, I would say, couple decades, but definitely a couple number of terms, and at least 4 terms. And yeah, so this is going to be a change election, and the mayor may need that veto power if we get a couple of progressives in, but we'll see how that all shakes out.
Yeah, I guess the way I look at it is because, like, I look at the results from the last election. John Tory got close to 500,000 raw votes just voting for him as mayor. Like, that's more than the premier would get in his own riding. That's more than like individual MPP would get in their own riding. That's definitely more than an individual city councillor would get in their ward. And yet the mayor is expected to be like on an equal footing with the members of council. So he would be just like one vote on council. So I think for me, there's a bit of a disconnect in that. And then, like, I guess my concern is, like, it's sort of an import from American political systems. I don't know how well that would jive up here in terms of like governing our cities. But yeah, I mean, I wish there would be more debate on this rather than just being imposed on us.
On that, we agree. Yeah.
Okay. I guess, like, my last 2 questions are a bit of a softball, and I guess, like, I think looked this up before, and I probably know the answer. Like, who are your inspirations? Like, who are the people that kind of inspired you to do what you do?
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, I feel like I'm like an auntie to a lot of young people. There's a lot of kids in my neighborhood who I care deeply about, and I care about their futures, and I care about, the opportunities that they have in this world, and how they have to navigate this world. They motivate me. They drive me every day. I had a niece born late last year, and so I'm really motivated by the young people in my life because of some of my experiences as a racialized person, as a, someone growing up in poverty. I want better for them. But I've also been incredibly inspired by leaders in my community, like Jean Augustine, who has just an absolutely incredible legacy of service and accomplishment in Etobicoke Lakeshore and in Canada, frankly, right? She's really made waves, both for the Black women and Black community, as well as just for our community on a whole. So Jean is someone who's incredibly inspiring to me. When I was a young woman in middle school, she was our MP, and I remember her visiting the school, and she had these great little like certificates that she would give to the student of the month, that was signed in her name, and just was a really lovely acknowledgement and validation from someone important, to receive as a young person. And I just remember her consistently being present and participatory in community. And that was really inspiring and encouraging to me. And as I continued my advocacy journey and my involvement in politics, I later ran into kind of working within my current councillor and had a very different experience in terms of how I was engaged or not, and how I was treated as a resident or heard or not. And that was frustrating to me. And so no one else has gotten as close as I have, frankly, in recent years. And so I really hope to get over the top this time.
Okay, cool. So I guess my last real question, a little more fun.
I like fun.
For those visiting your ward, like what are the is there like something that if I was to go to Etobicoke Lakeshore, like is there like a particular restaurant or place that I definitely would need to go?
Yes. Oh my God. That's a great question and definitely lots of fun. There actually was a recent Star article, I want to say, about a section in New Toronto, which is right where I live, literally like 1 block away, between about Kipling and Lakeshore and Islington and Lakeshore. There's a stretch of like mom and pop restaurants. So you can find everything from Caribbean food to like a Polish bakery. And there's a gentleman named George. I have to shout out George because George is a staple in the community. He has been running his business for over 50 years, and he has a submarine shop. He makes every single sub by hand, and I've been going to see George since I was a young woman, roaming the streets and getting into trouble as a young teenager. But George is still to this day, right on Lakeshore, Islington and Lakeshore, on the south west corner of the block, and the submarine shop. And then you could grab a sub and walk straight down 7th Street to a beautiful park at the bottom of the street. And there's a gorgeous lake view. You can see the city. And again, you can see across to some of our other neighbors in like Hamilton and St. Catharines and others, depending on how bright the day is. So it's a gorgeous community. I feel absolutely blessed and privileged to live here. I've always been near water. My father lives on an island, and so I spent a lot of time on the water there, and of course here I've been beside the water my whole life, and it's a really just special place, and I'm really looking forward to making it even better.
Well, Amber, I wish you the best of luck in your campaign. This is Amber Morley. She's running in Ward 3 Etobicoke Lakeshore. The election is on October 24th. So Amber, for those out there who want to find out more information about you or reach out to your campaign, or maybe even want to volunteer for you, how can they find you?
For sure. So we're at Morley for Ward 3, spelled FOR Ward 3, across all socials. You can check me out on my website at ambermorley.com. I am going to be doing an update to the website later this month when we release our second piece of lit that will have a little bit more of our platform pieces and our value statements. And folks can also go to ambermorley.com/volunteer to sign up to join our team, drop lit and hit the doors and canvas, or also similarly ambermorley.com/donate to make a contribution. And anybody in the province of Ontario can contribute to a municipal campaign. You don't have to live in the city or even in the ward specifically. So any support is most appreciated, and we really look forward to getting this thing done and bringing some fresh perspective to City Hall and to the future of Toronto.
Well, cool. Well, thank you very much, Amber, for your time. I know you're very busy with your campaign, and I just want to thank you again for sitting down with me for this interview. And so this is the Muni Poly Matters podcast. I am once again Alan, signing off, and I want to thank Amber Morley again for her time this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Take good care.